y'all, it's Maciej here from Trade. Today we're going to brew some pour-over coffee, probably the kind of coffee that I brew most often. And I think a kind of coffee that gets a little over-mystified. Pour-over brewing is something that's been happening for over 100 years now, since Melita Benz invented the pour-over. So, definitely not something that just baristas in shops do. Keep in mind, the pour-over was invented way before the Mr. Coffee, obviously, right? The Mr. Coffee or the auto drip maker is something that imitates this. So something people have been doing for a very long time, something that's not particularly hard. So yeah, let's get to it. This is specifically a Kalita Wave, is the name of this pour-over. This recipe is pretty general, so I think it'll work pretty well for a Hario V60. It'll work pretty well for a Melita. The more traditional pour-over. I think you might have to make some adjustments in terms of how fast the water drips through, but generally these principles will apply. For our particular recipe for the Kalita Wave, we're doing 21 grams of coffee. We're going to be mashing that with 350 grams of water, or about 12 ounces of water. 21 grams of coffee ends up being right around a quarter cup for a medium roast coffee. Might be a little more for a dark roast coffee, might be a little less for like a super light roast. If you have a scale, again, definitely use that, highly prefer that. If you don't, not the end of the world. I'm gonna grind this coffee on a medium grind size. I'm gonna start basically at like the medium setting on my grinder and go from there. Certainly, if you brew it on that grind setting, you think it needs to be a little sweeter, you think the water's going through a little fast, feel free to go a little finer next time. If you think it's a little bitter or the water's going through too slowly, feel free to go coarser next time. Making these sort of adjustments is part of the fun of brewing this way, I think. So I'm gonna grind, I'll be right back. I've got my coffee ready. I'm just going to put it straight into my paper filter. Some people swear by pre-rinsing their paper filters, something that I definitely used to do as well. I've done some taste tests recently. I found that there really isn't a difference in results, especially with these paper filters. So I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to shake it a little to flatten it out. In the meantime, my water's ready, so it's time to start brewing. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start my timer, and for my 21 grams of coffee, I'm going to pour 50 grams of water to start. Trying to carefully pour it to get all the grinds wet, not miss any spots. This is going to start the bloom phase. So the bloom basically is our effort to make the carbon dioxide that's been built up in roasting coffee get out of that coffee a little bit, so the rest of the water that we pour has an easier way into the center of those coffee grinds to really extract all that good stuff. Our bloom is going to last 45 seconds, after which we'll start pouring the rest of our 350 total grams of water. And we're going to pour it kind of in pulses. We're not going to try to pour all that water in at the same time because we don't want it to drip through too quickly. This is a thing you'll have to play by ear with your specific coffee, with your specific pour over. I'll tell you kind of what I'm doing. So I'm going to pour up to 150 grams to start. And then I'm just going to try to refill it as I see the water going down at a fairly steady pace to get to 350, kind of between that 2 and 2.5 minute mark. I definitely don't want the water to go down so much that I'm starting to see the grinds pop up. I don't want dry grinds on top of my water. So I'm at 225. I've almost reached a minute and a half. Again, you don't need to follow this pace exactly. I'm not going to keep telling you the numbers the whole time, but generally you just want to get up to 350 in a little over 2 minutes. Pouring in a spiral pattern, again, trying to not hit parts of the coffee bed and not hit other parts. Everything I'm doing basically is about to keep things even and steady. So around 2 minutes, I'm hitting 350. One nice thing about the Wave is you can also kind of pour around these fluted edges and get some of those grinds that might be stuck up on your filter without just pushing them down to like a center point as you would in a Chemex, for example. So that makes this brew method pretty easy, I think, to get good results with. One thing, for a paper filter, you definitely will get not as much body as you would with a metal filter coffee like a French press, so the coffee won't be as thick feeling. On the other hand, you'll get a little more clarity of flavor, which is why I use at least a 16.5 to 1 brew ratio for this recipe, as opposed to a French press where I would probably use something a little stronger. You also don't have to worry about those little sedimenty kind of fine pieces at the bottom of your cup like you would with a metal filter, because the paper filter will catch all of those. That said, I think kind of any coffee tastes any good in any brew method that you like, more or less. Like if you like the coffee and you like the brew method, you could probably make it taste good. I don't love dark roasts in a paper filter is my one real exception, just because I think that oil that comes through in the French press, for example, really helps buffer through those like potentially slightly bitter dark roast flavors. But paper filter, whether it's a coffee that's super chocolatey, whether it's a coffee that's super bright, super floral, I think those flavors all actually come through pretty well in a pour over. While I was saying that, the last of our water finished dripping through at a little over 3 minutes, which I think will taste really good. So I'm going to take this off and just put it onto a cup for now so it doesn't drip on the counter. I'm going to give this a little swirl, make sure all of those dissolved solids there are well integrated. And yeah, you can definitely do this over a cup directly if your cup is big enough and you don't have one of these pretty carafes. The way I end up drinking most of my pour over hot coffee is I just pour a little bit at a time into a cup because I want that coffee to cool quickly. I don't prefer drinking super hot coffee. I think especially for a coffee that has some nuanced flavors, as this Kenyan coffee does, you really want it to cool a little to be able to taste all of them. So I kind of just end up pouring a little bit into my cup at a time, letting it cool. Still probably a little hot, but I'm really curious to taste it. Yeah, still a little hot, but some nice like raspberry notes coming through already. So yeah, pour over. Don't be intimidated by it. It's really not that hard. Even if you don't have a gooseneck kettle, just try to pour really slowly. You can definitely make one that tastes good and clean and get some good stuff out of that coffee. So enjoy. Thanks.